let me kind of clear up a misnomer. I was done. I just decided, in fact, it was right after Wrestle Rock, and it had nothing to do with, although it easily could have, it had nothing to do with the Wrestle Rock Rumble. But I decided I was done. And I told Mike Shields, who was the executive producer, that was it. I'm done. And I was actually, before I got into television, I was district sales manager for Chrysler Corporation, not a dealership, but for Chrysler Corporation. And I had already had some conversation about going back. So I was done. And the truth is, Wrestle Rock was a Sunday night, and Monday night, Jack Lanza, who, we had remained very close and are still close, he had already left and he was working for WWF. And he happened to call the following night, call me at home, and, I just want to find out what happened, how the crowd was, what they did. And, we talked, and I told him, and, I want to know how Waylon Jennings was, who did the post-match concert. And we were just about wrapping up, and he said, anything else? And I said, no. I said, well, I quit. I'm done. And he just said, BS. And I said, no, that's it, Jack. I'm done. Without, I won't get into the reasons, but he was aware, and I said, that's it. I'm done. And he said, what are you going to do? And, I told him, and he knew my background, that I had some conversations and thought there was a pretty good chance that I could go back to work for Chrysler. And he said, look, you haven't agreed to anything. And I said, no. And he said, I'm coming home tomorrow night. Don't do anything. And he said, we'll get together when I'm home. And, I said, I didn't think much of it. And I said, I'm not even going to talk to him for a week. And Jack said, I'll call you. And the next night he called and he said, listen, let's say we'll have breakfast in the morning. And I said, great, because I hadn't seen him for, probably a couple months, although we had talked. And I said, terrific. And Jack said, I'll pick you up. And I said, okay, great. What time? He said, 5:30. I said, Jack, I love you. I ain't getting up at 5:30 in the morning to have breakfast with anybody. Are you nuts? He said, I'm picking you up at 5:30. And I said, and I'm laughing, and I'm just saying, no way. And he said, I'm picking you up. I'll be out front at 5:30 and wear a coat and tie. And I said, you really? I said, you get hit with a chair or what? And he said, we're going to see Vince. And I said, come on, Jack, I've seen you in action. You don't really think I'm buying this rib, do you? And he said, you call Northwest Airlines, you ask if there's not a prepaid ticket in your name on the 6:40 flight tomorrow to LaGuardia. And I did. There was. We went, and I got out to the offices in Stanford and kind of saw people, I had a chance to meet with people kind of lower in the hierarchy. I met with Terry Garvin, I met with Pat Patterson, I met with George Scott, and then, I would spend some time with them, go back to the lobby, and then, I would go sit down with someone else, and then finally I got in to see Vince. Which obvious everybody else must have said, yeah, he's a good guy. I think he can help us, and we should hire him. So he did not take me away from the AWA. I was done, and granted, I think Vince did hire a lot of people away from the AWA. That was not my case.
Yeah, meeting Vince must have been not, I wouldn't say a lot of pressure per se, but, obviously maybe a little intimidating. What were your kind of thoughts then and there? Did you think like, oh, I'm gonna get hired today, I'm gonna hit this out of the park, or kind of what were your feelings on Vince and then working for the WWF?
Yeah, I didn't know if they were looking for somebody immediately, if they just thought this was a good opportunity to meet me if something came up, down the road. And it's interesting, funny, and absolutely true. Within the first 5 minutes of the conversation, it was just Vince and I in his office, just, one-on-one. Within 5 minutes, he said, "Tell me about your mustache." And I looked at him, I said, "I don't understand." I was like, "Well, it's above my lip, below my nose, centered. I don't know what you want to know." And you want to know when I grew it, how important it was to me. And he finally told me, he said, despite Gene, he said, I detest, or whatever word he used, made it clear he did not like facial hair. And, he made that statement, and he just looked at me. And I said, if I'm correct here, if you're kind of asking if everything would work out, would I be willing to shave my mustache? And he said, "Would you?" And I said, "I would." And, that was it. We talked for probably another hour about all different things. And he asked what I was being paid by the AWA. And I told him. And he said, "I appreciate that." And I had a quizzical look. He said, "I knew what you were making." He said, "You're honest." And we talked a little bit more, and then he said, "If I would offer you X, when would you be able to start?" And I remember I looked at my watch, and it was significantly more than I had been getting. I looked at my watch, and I said, "Well, it's about 3:20. We could round it up and say I could start at 3:30. And he laughed, and he just looked at me, didn't say anything. Literally, he pulled open his desk drawer, pulled out a razor, can of shaving cream, and said, "Bathroom right through that door." And I shaved my mustache right then and there. And then I walked back out, and Vince, just said, "You showed me something." And I said, "That would be," he said, "that when you say something, you back it up." He said, "You'll start Saturday in Detroit." And that's how I got hired.